Welcome to the Law Firm Practice Management Advice Podcast.
The fundamentals of business.
Join Kirk Stange of Stange Law Firm as he discusses helpful strategies, tools, and insights to grow and manage a legal practice.
Good ideas are simple.
From improving client relationships to managing your team and scaling your practice, this podcast offers practical advice for navigating the challenges of law firm management.
Shall we proceed?
Now, here's your host, Kirk Stange.
Welcome to Law Firm Practice Management Advice. We have an interesting topic today. The topic is the no work card. And this episode today is based on an article on my blog, lawfirmpracticemanagementadvice.com, dated March 6, 2026. And the title of the article is The Myth of Not Enough Work, Why Some Lawyers Still Miss Their Billable Hours. So as a follow-up to the episode today, go on over to lawfirmpracticemanagementadvice.com and read this article for more information. But let's go ahead and jump on into the topic at hand. The reality is billable hours really remain the economic engine of many law firms, and this is particularly true in areas of litigation. The reality is in litigation, lawyers don't typically know whether a case is going to settle, whether it's going to go to trial, how long it's going to last, how much time the case is going to take. And that's why most law firms in areas of litigation bill by the hour. And saying that, in firms that operate on the billable hour model, typically litigation law firms, profitability really does depend on lawyers being competent, communicative, and diligent in terms of how they handle their cases. And if they're being competent, communicative, and diligent, then they should be recording their time truthfully, accurately, and contemporaneously with the work they perform, right? So most law firms want their employees to record their time as they go. In this day and age, most law firms have practice management software where lawyers and legal professionals are able to record their time as they go. And the most common way to do this is increments of 0.1, with 0.1 being 6 minutes. Obviously, a 0.5 would be a half hour, 1.0 would be an hour. And so again, we're talking about increments of 0.1. Now, some law firms maybe are not using practice management software, so maybe lawyers are writing it down, and maybe some sort of billing clerk or admin in the office is punching in their time for them so it can be billed to the clients. But the reality is the billable hour model dominates in most areas of litigation. There could be some law firms doing flat fees or fixed fees, but typically in litigation, that isn't the case. And so billable hour is very important. When you look at national averages in terms of billable hour requirements, according to Yale Law School, the average billable hour requirement in a law firm is 1,700 to 23 hours per year. Obviously, different law firms are going to do this differently. You know, most law firms are going to be in this range. Maybe some law firms are below this range, or lest I say above this range. Again, this is going to vary based on the law firm. But law firms typically are budgeting themselves for these billable hour numbers wherever they have them placed, and they want their attorneys and paralegals and legal assistants and billable staff meeting the billable hour numbers. The billable hour numbers allow the law firm to meet its obligations, and that includes paying the lawyers, the paralegals, the legal assistants, their salaries and benefits. And if legal staff aren't billing their hours, it can be difficult to pay employees, and law firms could run at shortfalls and get themselves into financial trouble, okay? Having said that, in a lot of law firms, there's employees who don't meet the billable hour requirements. It could be a lawyer, it could be a paralegal, legal assistant, other billable staff, but they're just not meeting their billable hour requirements. And for law firm owners or managers, this can be frustrating. For those handling the budgeting of the law firm, obviously this can cause stress, because if billable employees aren't meeting their billable hour requirements, it can be hard to pay people, pay the obligations of the law firm, and so there can be the stress. But the most common reason billable employees are not meeting their billable hours, in my opinion, at least from what I've seen, is this argument of, I don't have enough work. And so they figuratively flash a no work card. It's like, yeah, I know what the billable hour requirements are, but I don't have enough work. I have no work. I have a no work card. And so, hey, you can't be upset with me about not meeting my billable hour requirements. You need to get me more work. And until you get me more work, I'm not going to bill my hours. I mean, this is the most common reason, at least I've seen, for employees not meeting their billable hour requirements. And I would guess lots of law firms see this as well. The reality, though, is that if you get these employees more work, so you assign them more cases, you assign them more projects, the truth is that a lot of these employees still don't meet their billable hour requirements. So they're saying they have no work, so you're giving them more work, you're giving them more cases, more projects, maybe you're setting them up with initial consultations to get them more work. But far too often, what is seen is these employees are still not making their hours. And so a critical question of this is like, why? You know, if the employee says they don't have enough work and then you're giving them more work and they're still not meeting their billable hour requirements, what's the deal? I thought they had no work, and I thought giving them the work would fix the problem. Okay, the reality is that a lot of these employees, even if you give them more work, the truth is they're not communicating with their clients as they should, or opposing counsel as they should. And maybe they're not involved in their case in ways that would naturally generate legitimate billable hours, right? So maybe they're not, right, doing adequate discovery in the case, sending interrogatories, requests for production, issuing subpoenas, taking necessary depositions. Maybe they're not hiring expert witnesses that they need to hire. Maybe they're not preparing for court dates, these kinds of things. And so look, some employees legitimately need more work, and when you give them more work, then their billable hours go up. That's what you're hoping for. But what I'm saying is, if you've got employees who are just consistently saying they need more work, and then you give them more work and they're still not meeting their billable hour requirements, then you have to ask what is going on. And far too often, it's not a work issue. They have the work, they're just not doing the work, or they're not recording their time for the work that they're doing. So if you're assigning more and more work to an employee and the billable hour numbers are flat and they're not going up, then you have a deeper seated issue. Okay? And I think a lot of law firm owners and managers have probably seen this. It's a deeper seated issue. You're giving them work, the billable hours aren't going up. So you need to then delve into that. What is that? Okay? Oftentimes, again, it's not careful case preparation taking place. Like, that's not being done. That's why the billable hours aren't going up. Careful case preparation isn't taking place. Again, not communication with the client. So, you know, clients may be complaining, their phone calls, their emails are not being responded to. Maybe opposing counsel is complaining, the lawyer's not responding to communication. Sometimes lawyers and legal staff aren't paying attention to details, so they're rushing their tasks. They're doing motions and pleadings and these kind and discovery in a rushed manner, and they're going so fast that they're not paying attention to key detail. Okay, and so that ultimately can be the issue in terms of why they're not meeting their billable hour requirements. The truth is that on the flip end, lawyers who are competent, communicative, and diligent, they're being proactive on their cases, they're communicating, they're doing careful case preparation, they're paying attention to details. These employees almost always naturally meet their billable hour requirements because they're doing good work, they're remaining engaged, and then they're recording their time consistently and contemporaneously with the work that they perform. You know, by contrast, lawyers who struggle to meet their billable hour targets oftentimes have plenty of work. So the issue is not the volume of work available. Instead, it really relates to, hate to say it, work habits, discipline and timekeeping, case management skills, and then really poor communication practices in terms of how they communicate with their clients. So look, ultimately, law firm leaders just need to be cautious about assuming that a billable hours shortfall is simply a workload issue. Okay, it's really tempting for law firm managers and leaders to believe that giving work to an employee who's not meeting their billable hour requirements will solve the problem. In practice, that solution frequently fails because, again, there's another underlying issue that has really little to do with the volume of work. It's about the work habits, it's about the organization, the communication, the diligence on the cases, and it may be about rushing the work, not completing the work, or not performing it in really a top-notch manner, okay? So if you're a law firm manager, you're a law firm owner, you're giving work to an employee, the billable hour requirements are not being met, the billable hours are not going up, then you need to look at these other issues, okay? These other issues far too often are the issue, and I would just say this too, you can get yourself in a lot of trouble if you keep piling work on an employee who's not meeting the billable hour requirements, because what you might find is then they're not doing work on these cases at all. Then you end up with a bunch of unhappy clients. So, continuing to pile work on an employee who's not meeting billable hour requirements might just mean these cases are neglected. So you've got to be really, really careful and get to the real cause, the real root of the cause if you're assigning work to an employee and the billable hours are not going up. Get to the deeper seated issues about the employee's work habits, timekeeping practices, and the level of engagement they have with their cases, okay? And so just know in the end, billable hour challenges are not always solved by simply increasing the workload, okay? Instead, you have to address them in terms of greater discipline, stronger accountability, and a clear understanding of how law firm economics actually operate, because the truth is a lot of employees don't connect those dots. They don't truly understand that if they're not meeting their billable hour requirements, then it can hurt the firm. It can make it hard for the firm to pay that employee. It can stagnate raises and increases in benefits. So a lot of employees need to have a clear understanding of, look, you got to work a little bit harder. We got to be more disciplined. We got to focus on these cases, and we need to record our time truthfully, honestly, and accurately. And until you get an employee understanding those things, continuing to give more and more work to an employee who consistently is not billing their hours is often not the solution, and may just lead to unhappy clients, because you're giving a bunch of work to these attorneys who aren't making their hours, and they don't even do the work, okay? So be very, very careful there. Again, very interesting topic. As a follow-up to the episode, going over to lawfirmpracticemanagementadvice.com, read the article titled "The Myth of Not Enough Work, Why Some Lawyers Still Miss Their Billable Hours." The date of this article is March 6, 2026. It'll give you more information on this topic, but thanks for tuning in today. Stay tuned to our next episode of Law Firm Practice Management Advice coming up. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Law Firm Practice Management Advice Podcast with Kirk Stange. Kirk Stange is the president and founding partner of Stange Law Firm, a multi-state divorce and family law practice. For more insight on similar law firm management topics, visit his practice management advice blog at lawfirmpracticemanagementadvice.com.